This nibble originally aired on RSBANDB Update, episode 805, Colossal Tooltips. Enjoy. All combat abilities now have an icon indicating whether they are single target, multi-target, self-target, or area of effect. And I think this is the point in time where we can jump in.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed the icons, and I only knew what they meant because I knew they added these icons. If I didn't have that context, I'd have a hard time figuring out what an arrow pointing to a dot means.
That's a single target one.
That's a single target one. And then there is one that is a face with two arrows pointing to it.
That's the self ability, right?
That's the self ability. Then there is a circle with arrows pointing outwards.
Yeah.
That's an area of effect. And the last one, I forgot how it looked like.
Multi-target would be something like...
Ricochet?
Yeah, I'm looking at the ranged ones right now as well myself. That's an easy one.
It's free. It's an arrow splitting in three with three dots. Ricochet is an example. So, the icons work, right? Like we could figure out what they mean, but we have the context of what they actually are meant to mean.
Because we have the show notes right here, or the dev notes right here.
Yeah. If you came into the game and you didn't know what the icon was even there to represent, maybe it represents the timeline, right? Like maybe if you use Ricochet, you cause a split timeline, and in one of them the Elder Gods win and the others don't, right? Like, it could be anything. Like if you don't know the context, it could be anything, and I think you'll have a hard time figuring out what it means.
Yeah, the AoE one makes no sense to me.
I mean, it's an area spell, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the way to look at it.
Yeah, it doesn't even look like arrows to me. I mean, and maybe it's just I'm not seeing things properly, but it just looks like dots on the periphery of a rectangle.
Now, I think it's fine, right? Like, the icons are individually distinct enough.
Yes, and that was going to be my next point.
The thing is, there is no in-game way to learn about the meaning of these icons. Like,
yeah.
Well, it's in a tooltip, first of all, so you can't hover over something in a tooltip. So that's the first problem.
And even if you take it to the powers interface and drag it to the right-hand side where you can learn more about it, there's things you could look like you could hover on, but nothing happens with that.
Yes. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, a lot of games, there's an icon that shows, like, the damage type. If you have, like, elemental damage in some RPGs.
Yeah.
Like, things like that, it's fine, as long as there's a way to sort of teach yourself these icons. And I think that's sort of missing.
Like,
here.
if you see something that looks like a wind gust, you're going to know it's an air spell. If you see something with a flame, you're going to know it's fire.
Yeah, those icons tend to be pretty straightforward, but sometimes you get unconventional elements like force or arcana and things like that. So it's not always, and I think that's fine. I think it should be a principle that we're no longer living in the 70s or 80s where you needed a manual to play a game.
Yeah.
Like that
yeah, that's a good point.
Like that, we're past that time. Like a game should be able to teach itself, and we have tutorials for that. But you don't want to I've seen games where they just go and explain the interface like bit for bit, and ideally you want the interface to be structured in such a way that you can teach yourself what each of these icons mean. Like I could just hover over it,
so that
and
it's
it will tell
learnable.
me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's my biggest gripe.
But you know what the really
the
interesting
right
thing
now
is that, if we're looking at Ricochet, like you mentioned, and you see the requirements down below, you can hover over that. And it says 12 ranged and dual wielding weapons needed. Granted, I'm looking at Needle Strike now, but you can definitely hover over the stuff in the bottom.
Yes, exactly. And I think the dual wielding ranged weapons, I think that's an important one, because that icon is also not super clear. The ranged one, of course, you can learn the ranged icon from other places, but I mean, that's exactly what I would hope for the icons in the top to be as well, because I showed you the example earlier in pre-show, which is in the defense tab, which let's see if I can find which one it was again.
Let's see what it built. Yeah, because
revenge, right?
Revenge.
It's the fourth one in the defensive abilities. It's a self skill, and there's 45 seconds in the top, right next to the hourglass. And with the new bullet points, they added a duration as a bullet point as well, which is 19.2. And that was a source of confusion for me when I looked at it, because I was like, but there's a time-related icon that says 45 seconds up there. And
that's the cooldown.
19... And that's the cooldown. So, I mean, in a way, the cooldown to me sounds less important than the duration. So I think there's improvements to be made. Like, in a way, yeah, like resonance has the duration, like as like the second bullet point, right? So it's really not discoverable. Like, to me, it almost makes sense that duration has its own, little icon slot.
Yeah, I was thinking that you could put it right up there with the cooldown.
Exactly. Like, if you hover over these abilities, you see there's like 5 squares, which are sort of the requirements. Like, those are pretty clear, right? Like, you can teach yourself what they mean.
Yeah, and it says right underneath. Like, one is defense,
it says right
and one is
underneath.
shield.
Like, if they had just made like, in a way, if they had just made like a second row, or maybe even reused these ones and used them for things like duration and like the icons of what type of spell it is, like what the target of the spell is, I think like it doesn't remove a lot of clarity, and I think it's much more learnable and much more scannable for someone who's familiar with the UI.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about this is that anybody who's not listening to this podcast, who doesn't have the patch notes up from this week, won't know what the 4 different icons of ability types means.
Yes.
Without looking at the patch notes or listening to this.
Yes.
And that's a big point.
So I definitely think it's a great step in the right direction.
Oh, yeah.
I shall tell you, like, when I read this, the first thing that came up in my mind is that this immediately makes the game feel a lot more mature. Like, a lot more professional. If you just take the time to present information in a digestible and scannable format, that's a good thing. But as you can see from our current discussion, I also think we have a very long way to go. I think going from freeform text to this is just the first step in hopefully many.
Yeah, and these descriptions have been the same since EOC came out, so that was a long time ago, and people know what they do but the back of their own hand. But for somebody who is coming in, who is a brand new player, who's going to download mobile in early 2021, isn't going to have the slightest idea. And that's why this is important. Yeah.
Now, I'm bashing a tiny bit on this, right? I want to say, yes, tiny bit, but also it is an improvement. And if you want to test how much of an improvement it is, like, go to some of these abilities, try to understand what they're doing, right? Try to get a feel for the new system, then go to the prayers tab and try interpreting that.
Yep, that's a very good example. Very good example.
And I think if you go to like combat magic, like, I have Lunas active right now, so I can't really check. But I think, like, even here, like, there's a heal your familiar, boost its combat stats, and extends its lifetime by 20% of its starting value. That should be 3 bullet points. That's spiritual healing, for example. So, for all the problems we're having with the ability, or the new combat, with the combat information in general. I kind of hope they bring this new tooltip style to magic spells and prayers.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the melee ones right now, and they are much improved. So,
yes.
And, you know, we're highlighting the little niggles here and there, but overall, this is a good update. You can find full episodes of RSBANDB Update right here on this YouTube channel. If you found this video useful or just enjoyed it, like and subscribe, or leave a comment.